Have you ever noticed how it's possible to be surrounded by people and still feel an emptiness that's hard to explain? It's not loneliness in the traditional sense.
What was I supposed to do?
You talk, reply to
I was
messages,
trying to protect
attend
you.
gatherings, even laugh at times. Yet inside, there's a strange, uncomfortable silence. A space that never seems to be filled. This kind of emotional emptiness is one of the most misunderstood feelings of modern life, because others can't see it. Only you can feel it. Many people believe emotional emptiness only appears when we are physically alone. But the truth is, it often becomes stronger when we are with others. That's because being around people does not guarantee real emotional connection. You can share the same space, the same routine, even the same bed, and still feel unseen, unheard, and deeply misunderstood. This emptiness is often mistaken for ingratitude. You may think, I have people around me, so why do I feel this way? And then guilt follows. But emptiness is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of love for others. More often, it's a sign that something within you has been silenced for a long time. Unexpressed emotions, ignored needs, parts of who you are that had to be hidden to please, belong, or survive. We live in a world that values physical presence but neglects emotional presence. We learn how to occupy spaces but not how to inhabit ourselves. And when you disconnect from who you truly are, no amount of external companionship can fill that inner space. In this case, emptiness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of self-connection. Recognizing this is the first step, because as long as you try to fill this emptiness with relationships, distractions, or external validation, it will remain there, asking for attention. Emptiness does not appear to punish you, but to alert you. Something inside you needs to be heard. One of the main reasons emptiness appears even when you're not alone is the superficial nature of many connections we build over time. This doesn't mean the people around you are bad or indifferent. Often, they simply learned how to relate on a shallow level because they were never taught to go deeper, just as you may not have been either. Constant conversations are not the same as deep connections. You can talk to someone every day and still never feel truly understood. When dialogues are limited to routines, obligations, distractions, and appearances, something essential is missing: real emotional exchange. The kind where you can speak about your fears, doubts, pain, and silences without needing to justify yourself or put up defenses. Many people get used to wearing emotional masks to keep relationships functioning. They learn to say, "I'm fine," when they're not. They learn to smile to avoid conflict. They learn to be pleasing so they won't be abandoned. Over time, this adapted version becomes so present that the real one begins to fade. And when no one knows who you truly are, emptiness settles in. This kind of disconnection is quiet. There are no constant fights or dramatic breakups. On the outside, everything looks normal, but inside, there's a feeling of being emotionally alone, even while accompanied. It's as if you're physically present but emotionally absent, and the longer this lasts, the harder it becomes to identify what's missing. In this context, emptiness doesn't arise because you need more people. It arises because you need more truth. Emotional truth. Truth in conversations. Truth in how you express yourself and allow yourself to be seen. Without that, any relationship, no matter how long it lasts, begins to feel empty, repetitive, and distant. Paying attention to this is essential because emptiness doesn't ask for a greater number of connections. It asks for depth. It asks for relationships where you don't have to shrink yourself to fit, where you don't have to hide parts of who you are to be accepted. When that doesn't exist, emptiness becomes a constant reminder that something essential is missing. Many people spend their lives trying to get rid of emotional emptiness as if it were a defect that needs to be eliminated. They seek constant distractions, intense relationships, overloaded routines, non-stop entertainment. Silence feels uncomfortable. Being alone with one's thoughts feels frightening. But emptiness, contrary to how it seems, is not the enemy. It is a signal. And like every signal, it exists to communicate something important. Emptiness arises when there is a disconnection between what you feel and how you live. When your external life keeps functioning, but your inner life is being ignored. It appears when you spend too much time meeting others' expectations and too little time listening to your own needs. In this sense, emptiness is an alert that you have drifted away from yourself. The problem is not feeling emptiness. The problem is running from it. When you try to silence it, it intensifies. When you try to artificially fill it, it returns even stronger. That's because emptiness does not want to be filled. It wants to be understood. It wants space to exist, to be heard, and to be translated into awareness. There is a deep difference between being empty and being in inner silence. Silence is presence. Emptiness is the absence of self-contact. And this absence often comes from old emotional wounds. Rejection, abandonment, invalidation, moments when you learned that feeling too much was unsafe. To survive, you closed yourself off. But the same closure that protects also isolates. When you begin to look at emptiness with curiosity rather than fear, something changes. It stops being an undefined weight and starts revealing its causes. Emptiness may be pointing to boundaries you don't set, truths you don't speak, dreams you've shelved, emotions you never allowed yourself to fully feel. Understanding this is an essential step toward transforming emptiness into awareness. Because emptiness does not want to destroy you. It wants to reconnect you. It appears as a silent invitation for you to return to inhabiting your own life, instead of merely moving through it on autopilot. When you listen to that invitation, emptiness slowly begins to lose its power. One of the deepest roots of emotional emptiness lies in the fear of abandonment. Many people learned early in life that, in order to be accepted, they needed to adapt, adjust, and slowly erase parts of themselves. It wasn't a conscious choice, but an emotional survival strategy. When being yourself felt risky, being who others expected felt safer. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. You start saying yes when you want to say no. You agree to avoid conflict. You stay silent so you won't disturb others. Little by little, you give up your authenticity to keep connections alive. The problem is that relationships built on fear never offer real safety. They only reinforce the belief that if you show who you truly are, you'll be left behind. Emptiness emerges precisely here. When you are accompanied, but not whole. When important parts of you remain hidden so the relationship can continue. Being with someone under these conditions doesn't bring presence. It brings emotional exhaustion. Because sustaining a version of yourself that isn't real requires constant effort. This kind of dynamic often has roots in childhood or in significant emotional experiences. Moments when your feelings were minimized, ignored, or rejected. You learned that you had to be less in order to fit. Less sensitive, less intense, less truthful. And this learning, even when unconscious, shapes how you relate as an adult. In this context, emptiness is the reflection of an inner absence created over time. It's not that someone is missing by your side. What's missing is your full presence. The freedom to exist without fearing the loss of the other. The security of being who you are and still being chosen.
I can't believe you did this.
Recognizing this can be uncomfortable, but also liberating.
I was trying to protect
Because
you.
emptiness starts to reveal where you abandoned yourself in order not to be abandoned. And as long as this pattern remains unseen, you will continue surrounded by people and distant from yourself. Healing doesn't begin by pushing others away, but by moving closer to who you truly are. Many times, emotional emptiness hides behind something that seems to be its opposite, the constant presence of someone. You're never alone, always have someone to talk to, share your day with, and make decisions alongside. On the outside, this looks like connection. But inside, there may be a silent emotional dependency that keeps emptiness alive, even in the company of another. Emotional dependency doesn't start with control or extreme attachment. It begins when you start using the other person as your main source of meaning, validation, and emotional safety. When your well-being depends on someone else's mood, attention, or approval. In this scenario, being accompanied doesn't bring fulfillment. It brings temporary relief from the fear of being alone. Emptiness shows up precisely when the other person isn't available in the way you expect. A delayed reply, a different tone, or a brief absence is enough to trigger anxiety, insecurity, and a sense of abandonment. This happens because, internally, you haven't yet built a safe space within yourself. The other person became the emotional support you never learned to be for yourself. This type of bond is often mistaken for intense love, but love doesn't empty you, trap you, or erase you. When you need someone else to feel whole, something is out of balance. Healthy relationships add, they don't replace. They happen between two people who already have a sense of identity, not between two unmet needs trying to sustain each other. In this case, emptiness works as a clear alert. You are seeking outside what can only be built within. As long as your identity, self-worth, and value depend on someone else's gaze, no presence will ever be enough. The other person may be there every day, and still emptiness will appear in the moments of silence. Recognizing this pattern is not about self-blame, but about emotional responsibility. It's understanding that the most important connection in your life is the one you build with yourself. When this inner foundation starts to strengthen, the presence of others stops being a desperate need and becomes a conscious choice. After understanding the origins of emotional emptiness, an inevitable question arises. What exactly is this emptiness trying to show you? Persistent feelings don't exist by accident. They remain when something important has not yet been seen, acknowledged, or transformed. Emptiness is not a flaw in your emotional system. It is a message. In many cases, emptiness appears when you are living a life that is not aligned with who you truly are, when your choices, routines, and relationships do not reflect your deepest values. You may be meeting external expectations, following paths considered right, maintaining stable relationships, and still feel that something essential is missing. This inner misalignment creates a constant sense of disconnection. Emptiness can also be teaching you about boundaries. Many people feel empty because they give too much and receive too little. They are always available, always understanding, always present for others, but rarely prioritized. Over time, this unbalanced giving leads to emotional exhaustion and the feeling of being unseen or undervalued. Another important message of emptiness is the need for authenticity. It shows up when you suppress emotions, opinions, and desires to keep the peace or avoid rejection. Every time you silence yourself to be accepted, a part of you is left behind. Emptiness is the accumulation of these unlived parts, these unspoken truths. Learning from emptiness requires courage. It requires slowing down, observing patterns, and questioning automatic choices. It requires asking yourself, where am I betraying myself? Where am I living in survival mode instead of presence? These questions don't bring immediate answers, but they open space for real change. When you begin to listen to what emptiness is teaching you, it stops being a burden and becomes a guide. It shows where adjustments need to be made, where life asks for more truth, more coherence, and more self-care. And the more you learn from it, the less it needs to scream to be heard. One of the most important steps in transforming emotional emptiness is learning how to be with yourself without trying to escape. Many people avoid silence because they believe that when they are alone, emptiness will grow. But in reality, it is precisely in the absence of distractions that you begin to reconnect with yourself. Being with yourself is not abandonment. It is reconnection. Emptiness loses strength when you build inner presence. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of listening to yourself more honestly, respecting your limits, and validating your own emotions. When you stop judging yourself for what you feel, something inside you begins to settle. Learning to be with yourself involves developing internal emotional intimacy. It means acknowledging your pain without immediately trying to fix it. It means accepting that not everything needs a quick solution. Some emotions only ask to be held. When you offer that to yourself, emptiness slowly begins to be replaced by a sense of inner grounding. Another essential point is distinguishing loneliness from solitude. Loneliness is the feeling of disconnection, even when accompanied. Solitude is the ability to be alone without feeling incomplete. People who develop solitude don't reject relationships, but they don't depend on them to feel whole. They choose to be with others. They don't escape themselves through others. Emptiness also diminishes when you invest energy in activities that reconnect you with who you are, not just with what is expected of you. Creating, writing, walking, reflecting, learning, expressing. Anything that brings you back to the present moment strengthens your inner identity. When you learn to be with yourself, the presence of others stops being an emotional anesthetic and becomes a complement. Emptiness doesn't disappear magically, but it transforms. It loses its sense of absence and gives way to a more conscious, inhabited, and truthful inner space. Reaching this point means understanding something essential. Emotional emptiness is not a sign that someone is missing from your life, but that inner presence is missing. You can be accompanied, loved, desired, and still feel empty if you are not connected to yourself. No external relationship can sustain what hasn't been built within. True connection begins when you stop using others as an escape and start meeting yourself first. When you take responsibility for your emotional life and stop expecting someone else to complete you. People are not meant to fill voids. They are meant to share paths. When this understanding settles in, relationships become lighter, more genuine, and freer. Emptiness loses space when you begin to live with greater emotional coherence. When what you feel, think, and do start to align. This requires difficult choices. Saying no when you used to say yes, stepping away from relationships that don't allow your truth, moving closer to those who respect your essence. These choices don't remove discomfort immediately, but they build integrity. It's important to understand that feeling empty at times is part of the human experience. The problem is not feeling, it's staying disconnected. When you develop emotional awareness, emptiness stops being a permanent state and becomes a temporary signal for adjustment. It appears, you listen, adjust, and move forward. The real connection you seek in others is born from the connection you cultivate with yourself. When you feel whole inside, the presence of others stops being a necessity and becomes an exchange. Relationships stop being places of emotional compensation and become spaces for mutual growth. If you made it this far, you may already know, you were never truly empty. You were just distant from yourself. And the good news is that this path back is always available. All it takes is the willingness to listen to yourself, respect yourself, and choose yourself a little more each day.